Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition, and we turn now to the little poem 533, Two Butterflies Went at Noon. Now, this is an interesting poem. When published in 1891, it was titled Two Voyagers. And to some degree, this is a poem Emily came back to in 1878. She returned to this poem, and the scholar Johnson points out the ways in which she began to edit, quite heavily actually, this poem. I'll let you guys do your own study on that count. Our assumptions are, though, that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side. Chats with Emily's our playlist. I'm hopeful that you worked through our set of introductory comments where, for example, we commented on the fact that Emily is a great lover of nature. So write that down. Let's remind ourselves of that again. She can learn from about anything. So, for example, now it's going to be two butterflies that she's looking at. Okay? I'm also hopeful that you've already worked through our previous 532 poems. We just finished with 532. I tried to think a lonely thing. And if you've already done that study with us, you know that Emily often will look at some kind of object in nature, in this case two butterflies, to make some kind of comparison. Now, some have asked, is this poem an allegory about the brevity of life? And again, the publishers, not Emily obviously, who call this poem Two Voyagers, maybe are trying to get us to go back to our whole thinking of the Odyssey. Although, of course, the butterfly scene in All Quiet on the Western Front can also come to mind, that brilliant scene in that classic novel. This is maybe a poem about companionship, but I want you to pay attention to the verbs as we go through this one. Let's enjoy the poem. Two butterflies went out at noon and waltzed upon a farm, then stepped straight through the firmament and rested on a beam, and then together bore away upon a shining sea, though never yet in any port their coming mentioned be. If spoken by the distant bird, if met in ether sea, by frigate or by merchantman, no notice was to me. Now, is this a poem about companionship? In other words, the butterflies. In its most simplistic rendition, this is a poem about Emily seeing two butterflies that came, flew around, she calls it waltzing, around, and then left, and that was the end of it. So that's the entirety of the poem at its literal level. But it's, of course, Emily. So we'll ask, what's she really suggesting here? Notice she'll begin, notice not with one butterfly, but with two. By the way, Emily's into butterflies. As we have said, she loved her father's garden. I don't mean where she, planted peas and beans and carrots. The garden of flowers, right? And lots of butterflies must have frequented her garden. She will reference a butterfly in 27 of her poems, and butterflies, like this one, in 17 other poems. So, she loves the idea of the butterfly, and of course some of you are maybe huge fans of butterflies for any number of reasons, especially think about how a butterfly is made in regards to what it comes from to what it becomes, okay? And for those of you who are Bugs Life fans, you obviously as children learned that little notion that butterflies, these majestic creatures, start out as disgusting worms. And then they somehow transform. So is this a poem about transformation? Is this a poem about companionship and transformation? Notice she'll start. And again, pay attention to her verbs. It's quite remarkable. Two butterflies went out at noon. This is fun. Exploration. In other words, an odyssey. Can we say it that way? And waltzed upon a farm, then stepped straight through the firmament and rested on a beam. Notice the game Emily loves to play with sound. No. You won't. It's far. So clearly it's going to be rested on a barn. Why wouldn't she rhyme? Emily does this all the time. The word you think she's going to use, especially because it starts with a B, and then she says, no, rested on a beam. Why not barn? It's almost as if she doesn't want to trivialize whatever it is that she's playing with here. And she's kind of watching these butterflies do their movement. By the way, the firmament gives some sense of circularity, of circumference. Yes? In other words, some sense of this is the way journeys are played out. You can go back and look at our study on Journey of the Magi by T.S. Eliot. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. That idea of coming, right, of the full circle, if you will. Rested on a beam. And then, together, again, are we talking about companionship here? Bore away upon a shining sea. So off they go. Of course, again, this breaks down at the literal level because, hello, can butterflies swim out over the ocean for prolonged periods of time without having some place to land? We normally don't think so, other than they might land on what? Well, she'll get to it in a moment. Though never yet in any port there coming mentioned be. In other words, I never heard about two butterflies that I got news back that they went out on the and they arrived at some harbor. If spoken by the distant bird, if met in ether sea, by frigate, a ship, or by merchantmen, no notice was to me. Now, the key word here, notice, I think is significant because we're back to be and me, right? You probably did draw your arrow between the two words. And I think it's significant that she says, what I saw was briefly these two butterflies, and then they were gone and never came back. And yet, of course, here they are. We're reading about them now through her treatment poetically of them. When, by the way, we get to 541, we'll come back to this set of lines again. Some such butterfly be seen on Brazilian pampas just at noon, no later sweet. Then the license closes, some such spice express and pass, subject to your plucking as the stars you knew last night. Foreigners this morning, the brilliance of the S sounds of that poem. What do you think Emily is suggesting to it? I think that she's arguing, among other things, that life is always about exploration. And even her poetic life is about exploration, which is why I think the poem ends with the word me. At 2b, the verbs are compelling here. Waltzed, stepped, ritual, bore away. At 3a, think about Hamlet and his famous soliloquy, to be or not to be. And at the end, you'll remember that undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns puzzles the will. You'll remember he says. And of course, Homer's Odyssey obviously comes to mind. Think of all the great poems and how they are journey motif poems, right? Not just the Odyssey. The Iliad is a form of a journey, no doubt, but think about Virgil's Aeneid. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net of these great journey epics. Of course, Dante's Divine Commedia and his journey through Inferno and Purgatorio and Paradiso, right? Finally, at 3b, just to own a poem like this, what is your favorite voyage you've ever taken in your life? And is it possible that if not now, soon, maybe your favorite voyage will be your study of these poems? We'll see. Thank you.